It's been far too long. We haven't talked to you guys since last year, but we're excited to be back here on a beautiful evening. It's Froggy's Talking Sports with Ryan and Joe. My name is Ryan Peters. I'm joined by Joe Spillman, one of the leaders of the jungle, at least here in the wonderful city of Evie. Joe, how are you doing?
I'm doing excellent, right? I'm glad to be back. It feels like the absence from doing this has been just strenuous on my mind. I've gone into mental shutdown a couple times, just thinking, when are we ever going to be able to get a show in? And on the couple days prior to the divisional round for the Bengals, here we are doing a show. I'm pretty happy.
Yeah, and even have had some warmer weather. I mean,
Yeah.
it's kind of weird, but we've obviously been busy doing other things on tournaments, so the time of those have gone through, as well as obviously celebrating Christmas and the New Year's. But exactly right, we are glad to be back, and I think we got a jam-packed show for you today. We're going to talk obviously about some football. That's what's going crazy around this viewing and listening area. And Joe, let's just go ahead and dive right into the playoffs, kind of a recap. I'm going to ask you one question to begin this segment off. Was there a huge surprise for you in round one of the NFL playoffs?
I think I think the biggest surprise of the playoffs is the Jags Chargers comeback. I didn't necessarily think that the Jags weren't going to compete in that game, and I thought that the Jags and the Chargers playing in the wild card round was essentially going to be a pick'em game that could have won either way. But as it turned out, the Chargers came out and had one heck of a first half, scored 27 unanswered points. The Jags and Trevor Lawrence were able to score right before they went into halftime. But one of the best comebacks, I think, in recent years, at least in the playoffs, since Tom Brady, a couple of years ago against the Falcons in the Super Bowl. 20-point comeback, ended up scoring, what was it, 27 maybe unanswered points. Trevor Lawrence did. Ended up winning the game. I think the final score to that game was 34-30 or 33-30. I can't remember off the top of my head, but just an absolutely great comeback. That was probably my biggest surprise of the playoffs. And really, to get into that game, I've heard a lot of hype about how it was just a monumental breakdown from the Chargers, from the top down, from the head coach down to Justin Herbert. And I really disagree with that sentiment that you kind of been hearing, because I don't think that there was anything that really cost the Chargers to lose that game, or any one play or a series of bad plays. What I really think is we saw a Jags team led by Trevor Lawrence in an incredible comeback. And I think that that's what we're going to be seeing out of the Jags here in the very, near future. The next couple of years is a very tough team down in Jacksonville. So that was kind of the biggest surprise for me, or the biggest surprise seeing that comeback. It wasn't a surprise to me that the Jags won, but in the fashion that they won, it was definitely a surprising and fun to watch. So,
Right. Yeah, I mean, being down 27-0, your quarterback in his first ever playoff game, it's at home, and in the first half, he looked like he never played football before.
right.
We were doing a radio game on the road and watching it from afar,
Right.
and right before we go on air, I looked at you and I said, Trevor Lawrence has 4 interceptions and 4 completions, and
Right.
turned it on the radio, and at halftime, I was like, I don't know. At least we didn't miss anything being on the
Right.
air. And then at halftime, or a little after halftime, you keep getting these notifications. Hey, they're coming back, come back. And they're like, okay, I guess I'll turn it on. And oh my goodness, they do come all the way back. My biggest surprise, and this is from a negative standpoint, is how incapable and inept the Tampa Bay Buccaneers
Oh
looked.
yeah,
I just was completely blown away. I thought Tom Brady would be able to hit a switch that says I'm the greatest postseason quarterback of all time. I mean, his stats, and you could argue the greatest quarterback of all time, but postseason quarterback, I mean, there's none better with the championships, the yards, the touchdowns. And then the first time on the drive, Tom Brady takes him down the field and throws a red zone interception for the first time in 3 years. And it kind of just was that type of night for the Tampa Bay Bucks. Have they been playing good? No. Has anybody in the NFC South played good? No. But neither were the Dallas Cowboys, who absolutely got demolished by the potatoes, their last time out. And heading into the playoffs on the road, Dak Prescott had been looking great, and they could do whatever they wanted in that game. And Tampa Bay could do nothing that they wanted. So, I mean, that's the game that really just surprised me. I thought coming in on Monday night, Tom Brady would at least, have a fight, a prayer, and he didn't. I mean, that game was over pretty much as soon as they kicked the ball off, and that's all she wrote. My extra credit I'll give is the Giants. I think the
Yeah.
Giants could be a team that surprises people. Coach Daboll has that team ready to play. They've had their ups and downs, but they've had way more ups than they have downs. That being said, the Vikings are also probably the only 2 seed in the NFL history that every team wanted to go and play. So
Yeah,
I
they
don't think
really,
anybody's shocked by that.
yeah, they really lost it down the stretch there. And, I kind of want to jump off what you said about Tom Brady, and I don't even, I'm an out and open Tom Brady fan. I have been for a long time. I think I was with everybody, when you go back 15 years ago when, he was, 5-6 years into his NFL career, and it's like, man, can't this guy lose? And it's one of those, Dale Earnhardt, the Kyle Busch effect, or all, whatever the champion effect that you get on people. But as he got older and he maintained that level of greatness year after year after year, I think that you start to realize, you may never see this level of competitiveness again in your lifetime, and you really start to respect it. Now, Tom Brady's 46 years old. He still had the most completed passes in the NFL. He was still one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL this year. Unfortunately, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, when they brought Tom Brady in, really sold the house to build a championship team around him. And they were able to get it done his first year. They had Gronk, they had a couple other players, sold the house, were able to get it done, and unfortunately, just like we saw with the Rams, those older veteran players got a ring, and they said, thanks, Tom, thanks, Tampa Bay, but I'm out. I'm done doing this to my body. And the last couple of years, Tom Brady's really been stuck playing with, he's a great player. He's the greatest of all time, but he's playing with players that wouldn't be on a practice squad in any other city. So, I mean, you can't rush the ball. Your defense is bad. All that team really has is Tom Brady. And, Leonard Fournette, I know, battled injuries. He's a good running back, but, he battled injuries all year, and he's been rather disappointing. And Tom Brady had nobody to throw to, and still to complete the most passes in the NFL at 46 years old. I kind of put a cleave it or a caveat or a asterisk next to any team that makes the playoffs with a losing record. I think the NFL needs to find a way to fix that. I know that they won their very terrible NFC South division, but they did make the playoffs. He took his team to the playoffs again, and really, I don't think for people that are calling for Tom Brady to retire, I mean, I think he could walk away for the game and has been able to do that for several years with nothing else to prove. But he's still one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL at his age. So disappointing out of them. I was pulling for him, but you're absolutely right. I thought that, Tom Brady, just like you said, would find a will and a way to come out and make and have Tampa Bay win and push his team to a win. But they are really bad, and everybody around him's really bad. So I agree with you.
Joe, let's move into this week's games. And first, we'll start on Saturday. The Jaguars play the Chiefs. That will obviously take place in Kansas City because the Chiefs, by default, got a bye based upon what happened towards the end of the season, even though they lost to the teams that they are above. But that's neither here nor there. I'm sure we'll use our energy and anger later on in the show. But the Chiefs are currently at a 8.5-point favorite in that game. I'll go ahead and start it off. I think the Jaguars are good enough to cover. If you look at the defense for the Jaguars, their passing defense has been really good. But you're going to go ahead and say, well, how did they give up 27 points? Well, go back to when I said they had 4 turnovers in the first half, and they literally had a short field the entire time against Justin Herbert and that squad. But when it was played on a neutral field, the Jaguars won that matchup, enormously. I mean, they just dominated whenever the Jaguars defense was not put in a short field. Anytime you put your team in an opportunity where they have to play defense and only get 30 to 40 yards, it's really, really tough. And, it's their first playoff game for a lot of them. And, I think at the end of the day, you've seen what it was like whenever both teams were playing a normal set of football. And I thought the Jags did really, really well. I also am not scared by the Kansas City defense. So I think the 8.5 points will be covered. I think the Kansas City Chiefs do end up winning this game, but I think it's a lot closer than what people think. I just think the Jaguars have to come out ready to play. A lot of these guys, it's a road game. It's their second playoff game, but the first one on the road. Early start, a strong start will be good in their favor, and I think they can build off that. If they do anything close to what they did at home last week, it will be a rout.
No, I agree. You can't start off the way that you did. You can't turn the ball over 4 times in that game, period, let alone the first half. However, I think 8.5, 8.5 point spread in the playoffs is, especially for the divisional round. You can make an argument in some of the wild card rounds when teams sneak in there, but 8.5 points in the divisional round of the playoffs is a little crazy to me, and it's kind of disrespectful to the Jags, especially when you look at what they have done. Essentially the last 5 weeks of the season, they've been playing playoff football the last 5 weeks because they were in a tight race with the Titans. You go all the way back to the last second scoring drive against the Ravens. You look at what they did against the Titans. You look at what they did last year or last week. They've been playing come from behind football and finding a way to win. And I think that they can compete with Kansas City right now. And I think that they cover the 8.5. And I'll tell you what, and I'm not even trying to be a homer on this, I would not be surprised. I mean, I guess it would be a little surprising, but I wouldn't be shocked, I'll say, by the fact that if Saturday afternoon the Jags aren't heading to the AFC Championship game.
Yeah, I think there's got to be a lot of maturity, and I don't know if they're there yet. Same could be said with Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati
Right.
Bengals last year. I think that we see a good game plan on any given Sunday win, especially in the playoffs. And, at the end of the day, I think the strength of the Jaguars defense, the pass defense helps them. And Andy Reid, no matter what, he will not stick to the run. Whether he's getting 5 or 6 yards of carry, he just absolutely will not do it. Granted, when you have Patrick Mahomes as your quarterback, that's understandable.
Right.
But, I wouldn't be shocked either, Joe, if this comes down to a close game at the end. I do think Patrick Mahomes and company pull it out. But I think you're seeing the steps of what Coach Peterson, with his leadership and with the owner Khan, has been trying to put together. I think they finally got the pieces in place now.
No, yeah, I agree with that. And one last thing I'll say before we move on is the Jags, though, have that kind of air around them, or that mentality, exactly like Cincinnati Bengals had last year, where they played relaxed all throughout the playoffs because they've already beat expectations. They've already made the playoffs. They won their division. They've won a playoff game. They've already beat expectations. So everything that they're playing for now is a bonus. So either way it goes for them, they're walking out of this season with their head held high, and that's a very dangerous team because they're gonna play relaxed, and they're just young enough not to understand, just like the Bengals last year.
Yeah, the only difference is I think the Bengals have veteran pieces in place, especially on the defense, that could help them. A Von Bell, a Chidobe Awuzie, Eli Apple, DJ Reader. Those are the type of people in that locker room that can help that. The Jacks are just really, really young all the way around.
I agree.
So let's jump in. We have a divisional game on the NFC side, and that is the Giants taking on the Eagles. And that game is set at 7.5 points in favor of the Eagles. Joe, I'll let you go this time.
Yeah, I really think that this is another line that's kind of a slap in the face to the Giants, especially after what we just watched them do last week. But I will say that Jalen Hurts, toward the end of the season, took 2 weeks off, came back, didn't play a great game that last game of the season. And I kind of question, is Jalen Hurts actually 100% healthy? But I do agree, and I've said that, to a couple different people, and the comeback was, would they have played them in a meaningless game the last game of the season? And I agree with that. I think that the Giants could absolutely come and win this game. I think it's going to be a close game. I think it's going to be a lot closer than 7. 7.5 points. If I was going to bet on this game, I would take the Giants and the points. I think Philadelphia probably wins in the end, but I think you get another great game out of this.
Yeah, when teams, I said this all along. I've texted people whenever we play the Ravens. I hate the favorite when they play a team 3 times. It just always finds a way to be close. On paper, the Cincinnati Bengals were exponentially better in a lot of people's eyes than the Ravens. And people said, "How do you feel?" I said, "Not good."
Right. No,
I don't want to play a team 3 times. These teams know each other. Now, the difference is the first time they played each other, the Eagles won by 26. There's a healthy Jalen Hurts in that game. Now we don't know. He's practicing in full. He set some weeks out, but a shoulder injury is a shoulder injury. And Jalen Hurts, for what he's been able to do and what he's been able to show, his throwing has been a lot better. But at the end of the day, he wants to run, and I think that they're going to make him throw the football. And if there's any deficits when it comes to his passing game, the Giants will bring that out. My question is there a game plan by Coach Daboll that he has not used yet that he can bring out in this game to make the Giants compete to get the win? I do think the 7.5 points will be covered. I don't care if it was the Texans and the Colts playing in the playoffs for the 3rd time. I'm always going to take the points whenever it's given over a touchdown and the teams play each other 3 times, unless it's just something where, it's just a monumental butt kicking, every single time. I don't think that's going to be the case this week, especially when you put in the injury factor of Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, I agree.
So, Joe, now we move on to Sunday, where you and I will be moving on to Buffalo.
Yeah.
We may go through a table. We may have ketchup and mustard sprayed all over our faces.
Yes.
But we don't give a D.A. Markland damn if we come back with a W on the way back. The Cincinnati Bengals on the road to play the Buffalo Bills. The NFL has already started selling tickets to the AFC Championship game for this one. So maybe that's why tickets weren't as high as I thought they may be, because the NFL fixes in. But the Bengals are 5-point underdogs. Joe, how do you feel about this?
I think that is an absolute slap in the face to the Cincinnati Bengals, to the city of Cincinnati, to the fans all around the country that root for the Cincinnati Bengals. The NFL and the odds makers have just slapped you right in the schnoz, because we have watched this team all year be able to pick apart defenses that play 2 high safeties and drop back in the zone. They have been all year, and I know that a lot of people perceive last week against the Ravens or Sunday against the Ravens as a struggling Bengals offense 2 weeks in a row. But what you got to realize is that the Baltimore Ravens are built, legitimately and literally built, to beat the Cincinnati Bengals. That is what that franchise is founded on. And really every AFC North is. That's why it's such a competitive.
That's what their goal was, Joe. Right. Sorry to cut you off. That's what their goal was after Joe Burrow put up 40-plus points twice. They went into the offseason and said that'll never happen again.
Right. And they got one of the best, if not the best, defense in all of football. And I don't think that our offense played that bad. I don't think that anybody left the stadium feeling great, other than the fact that we just got a playoff win, because they did struggle at times. However, at the end of the day, we have seen the Cincinnati Bengals be able to pick apart a defense like Buffalo's, which they have absolutely no secondary. And if you're a Buffalo Bills fan, I'm sorry, you've seen it all year. That's why they're winning games 34-30, 38-35, 42-37, is because teams are able to come and score on them, and they have been all year. Look at Miami, which, you can argue Huntley playing against Cincinnati, but Huntley's not a bad quarterback. Miami literally had a USFL player playing quarterback that threw up 30 points on the Bills this week. So at the end of the day, I don't think that this is as competitive as a lot of people think. I think what you're going to see is Buffalo be able to move the ball up and down the field and settle for field goals all day, because the Cincinnati Bengals have one of the best, if not the best, red zone defense in all of football. And I think that Cincinnati and Joe Burrow are going to trade field goals for touchdowns all day long. And I think that the Bengals are going to score over 30. And I think that the Bills get kept to around 24. And you and I drive home for that 7-hour drive. just as pumped up as possible come Sunday night.
That would be perfect. I think the Cincinnati Bengals, I think they do win that game. Well, I'll tell you exactly why in our next segment. But the last game before we end it here will be a night game, a late afternoon game between what I think might be the best game of the week, and that's between the Cowboys and the 49ers. I think that has a chance to go back and forth. I wouldn't be surprised if that's a little bit more defensive than what people think. It's a 4-point favorite with the 49ers being the lead at home. I will take the 4 points. I think that Kyle Shanahan, getting Christian McCaffrey is huge. Their defense is really, really good. But I wouldn't be surprised if that doesn't come down to a touchdown either in overtime or at the end of the game, Joe. And that's why I take the 4, because I don't think the 7 points is going to be indicative of how close this game may be.
No, I agree. The only thing that scares me is Brock Purdy has been on one heck of a run, and he's young. And at some point, you're going to see that rookie game come out of him, come out. And I mean, because it's happened to Joe Burrow, it's happened to every rookie that's ever played the game. It's happened to Tom Brady. You're going to see it. And he has been, he has struggled at times for a quarter in the last 5 games that he's played, but he has not had that rookie 4 or 5 interception game that he's bound to have at some point. And unfortunately, that might be this weekend.
No, you could absolutely be right. The best thing you could do for a rookie quarterback, have a strong running game. And that's what the 49ers have had. But I think that'll be a good game. Well, that's going to wrap it up for us here. We're going to come back and break down said Bengals and Bills game. Thank you for joining us here on Froggy Talkin Sports. We'll be right back after the break. Welcome back to Froggy's Talking Sports with Ryan and Joe. My name's Ryan. I'm joined with Joe Spillman, and we talked a little bit on the first segment there about going to Buffalo. We are excited to make the trip. Actually, a little bit more surprised about how this trip, at least to us, is a little bit cheaper than what we thought it'd be. I mean, ticket prices for Buffalo and Cincinnati is cheaper than what Cincinnati had for the Bengals and the Ravens. Is that because the Bills fans are nervous? Is that because the NFL has already decided that the Bills and Chiefs are going to meet in Atlanta, so people are saving their money for that one? Is that because Bills fans, well, maybe they're not all that confident in their team? And Joe, I think it's a little bit of all that possibly mixed. Maybe it's the NFL. Maybe it's just the NFL. I don't know. But one thing is for certain, there's going to be a large presence of orange and black. And I want to break this game down from an offensive and defensive standpoint here on this segment. And you mentioned the offense, so we'll start ahead with that as your rationale for the Bengals covering the game and also winning the game. We mentioned here just a few minutes ago that the Ravens are built to face the Cincinnati Bengals, and I believe that anytime a team plays each other 3 times in a series, that game's going to be close. I just don't care. These teams are too close in talent in the NFL. I mean, the worst team in the NFL is closer to the best team in the NFL, maybe than any other sport, because that's why they call it any given Sunday, because we both know that that can happen. In the NCAA, it's not close. The best team in the SEC is monumentally better than the worst team in the SEC, and that's just in its own conference. But the Cincinnati Bengals offense has been held in check by the defense, and what has been changed about the Baltimore defense and what's changed in the way they attack Joe Burrow is they don't blitz anymore. Joe Burrow was blitzed 6 times in that game, and there's a reason why they don't blitz anymore. It's because he completed all 6 passes. He knows exactly when they're going to blitz. The thing the Buffalo Bills will not be able to do, Joe, that the Ravens have done forever, is design their scheme on how they're going to rush the quarterback. You don't have to blitz to get to the quarterback. You do stunts. You send people on the right side whenever you show pressure on the left. That doesn't mean it's more than 4 people rushing the quarterback. It just confuses the offensive line. I don't think that that's going to happen because since Von Miller's went down, Joe, the Buffalo Bills defense there on the front has not looked nearly the same.
No, they don't. And they don't have a great pass rush out of their front 4 anyway.
It's pretty much Ed Oliver and company from
right.
the way that I've been watching.
And so what you get is Joe Burrow, I think, was either the fastest or the second fastest in the NFL this year. He might have been just behind Tom Brady, actually, with his ability to get the ball out quick. And that's something Joe Burrow's had to adapt to over the last 3 years, especially last year, and then coming into this year with his poor line play. And that's why you see a lot of times Joe Burrow is hitting that check down. And a lot of times our check down is really effective for progressing the ball forward. But Joe Burrow knows how to get the ball out quick. And actually, I would contest, you've seen Joe Burrow have a problem this year with getting the ball batted down by defensive linemen. I think probably stands out more than anybody else in the NFL right now. And part of that is because of the Cincinnati Bengals offensive line and Joe Burrow's understanding of how fast he has to get the ball out. So I think you see that a lot more. But what happens when you start blitzing people on a defense is you're leaving holes in coverage because you're blitzing a guy that should be covering somebody. And even with the struggles that Cincinnati has had on their offensive line, even bad offensive linemen can pass block against bad defensive linemen, and that's exactly what you're going to see on Sunday. Now, I'm not saying that Joe Burrow is not going to get rushed, 4 or 5 times in this game. He very well may be, but he does something really good that you don't see a Patrick Mahomes do. You really don't see Brandon Allen do it, or Brandon Allen. Ooh, I'm sorry, Josh Allen.
Yes, you don't see Brandon Allen do a lot. You're
You
right.
don't see Brandon Allen do a lot. Man.
Thank God.
You don't see that might be enough to just tick Josh Allen off enough. So you know what? I'm
bulletin board material here at Froggy Talkin Sports.
One thing you'll see a Patrick Mahomes or a Jalen Hurts and a Josh Allen do is when they feel pressure, they run out of the pocket and they get outside, and then they try to use their legs to get the yards. Now, when you watch Joe Burrow scramble, one thing that I will say, and I know every Cincinnati fan holds their breath when he does it, when he scrambles, it's typically up the middle of the field because what he does is he's one of those pure pocket passers like Tom Brady. When he feels pressure, he climbs the pocket. He moves toward the line of scrimmage. And what that does, and the reason why he's doing that, one, it keeps all his routes available to him that he's watching down the field. And two, it allows his offensive linemen to cause the defensive pass rushers to run themselves out of the play. Now, you do see every once in a while where a defensive lineman will get a hand on him and take him down, but he's able to climb the pocket so well and keep his eyes downfield. That's why he has one of the highest pass completion rates in the NFL. And I think anybody that was down watching the game, or even if you were watching it on TV, the drive, the two, we got to see basically 1.5 offensive series out of the Cincinnati Bengals against this Bill defense a couple weeks ago, when right before that terrible incident with Damar Hamlin. But one thing that was very evident, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ryan, that Buffalo was going to have an extremely hard time in their secondary covering Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Tyler Boyd. All three of them were open on every play that they ran, and that's why Joe Burrow was 6 for 6 in the game, and they were about to go up 14-3.
No, I agree with you 100%. And this is the type of defense that Cincinnati likes to play against. You mentioned Joe Burrow faced the cover 2 almost the entire year, and you're absolutely right. He played against zone defenses because they realized that one-on-one, they do not match up well. Defenses against T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, and Joe Burrow can fit a ball in using man beaters, which is what he's got at wide receiver, and had to adjust. The beginning of the year, it worked. In the second part of the year or the middle part of the year, and we were on this channel complaining about Zach Taylor and his play calling and Brian Callahan, and they have changed things. They went primarily to the shotgun formation almost on everything that they do. When they go underneath center, it's almost like they use that play action more than they use just a straight drop back or a straight run. And those are adjustments that need to be credited to them because it has changed this offense. That being said, the Buffalo Bills think Tre'Davious White's one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL. And before he tore his ACL, he was. He was a really, really good cornerback, and they decided to use him like Darrelle Revis or insert, Sauce Gardner now might be that next guy that he just breaks down. He just covers a guy, he follows him, shadows him, and they don't need to worry about help. That's not the case anymore. The man defense on the cornerbacks has not been good. Their safety, Jordan Poyer's really good, but he's really good at hitting people, and even better, kind of like a Von Bell at stuff in the run. He's not great in the passing game. And obviously we know, unfortunately, DeMar Hamlin's not going to be playing football. Right. And he was a young safety thrown in there, promising safety, but still young. Now it gets even younger with the players that they're using in that secondary. And I think this is the perfect blend for where Cincinnati, can really mix things up, because the Buffalo Bills are either going to have to send pressure or, and this is where I only think the Buffalo Bills will have success on defense, is if the guys that Cincinnati, the three replacements, Jackson Carman, Hakeem Adeniji, and then Max Sharpling, have terrible games. I mean, just have terrible games. The good thing is, Ted Karras is probably going to be the one facing Ed Oliver, and that's the best thing that we can happen because that's their best player. But if those three guys are absolutely terrible, that's the only way I see Cincinnati's offense struggling. And I think what we have to see as well is we need to see Joe Mixon and Samaje Perine used more. I don't want to see Joe Burrow throwing the ball 55 times. I understand he's capable of doing that, but you got to get some balance in an offense.
I agree.
And another progression of Joe Burrow, as we said, he held on to the ball too long. You mentioned him climbing the pocket and rushing. Well, that's all been the second half. He's realized his tackles are going out too wide at times and kind of coming into his face. So he's climbed the pocket and he's found running room. I mean, we've seen him rush 5 or 6 times almost every single game now.
And it scares me every time
You're right. He's taken a couple hits, but more often than not, he's smart enough to know when to get down. He's not trying to fight for the extra yard or dive, unless it's a touchdown, and that's what you want your quarterback to do. But we've seen him be smart on those plays, and it's all north and south. Thank God it's not left and right. And normally that's where your quarterbacks get hurt, is running left and right, not north and south. But on top of it too, knock on wood, Joe Burrow, even though he's climbing the pocket, guy never fumbles. I mean, once in a blue moon, you might see him fumble, but some players, they just have that unable to take care of the ball. And honestly, we're going to talk about him on the other side of the ball, who's had a really hard time taking care of the ball.
Right.
But I think Cincinnati's offense is primed to break out in this game, and I think it's another game because this defense reminds me so much of Kansas City's, and we know what Cincinnati's been able to do against Kansas City. And you mentioned 2 drives. You're right, Joe. That was 2 drives getting ready to be 14 points, and I think this could be a heyday for the Cincinnati offense.
Now, one thing I do want to throw in there before we turn around and get to the other side of the ball is having said that, in what the Kansas City defense has allowed and what this too high cover 2 zone defense does allow is it allows Hayden Hurst, just like you see Travis Kelce all the time, run and stand in a spot for Patrick Mahomes. And Patrick Mahomes is so good at knowing right where Travis Kelce is at. Joe Burrow's been able to do the same thing with Hayden Hurst this year when he's been healthy. And Hayden Hurst is usually about as sure-handed as it can come for a tight end. He's a very good tight end. He's a good pass-blocking tight end too. And that's one thing that I think that we might see Wilcox and Hayden Hurst in the game together a whole bunch this week. I wouldn't be surprised if we see that. I expect a big game out of Hayden Hurst as well this week. I think they're going to be saying his name a lot.
No, I agree with you 100%. And that's a good point because the first touchdown was to Tyler Boyd. And that was because you had 2 man beaters on the outside that took care of both of the safeties. You had Hayden Hurst taking care of the middle linebackers. So who does that open up? The middle level for Tyler Boyd to split that 2 deep safety. Right. And he was wide open on that first touchdown because of exactly what you're talking about. And the difference between that type of zone defense and the type of the Ravens zone defense is the Ravens are just really smart. I mean, they force you to throw into the flat to your running backs or to take 3 or 4 yards right in front because they're just athletic enough with a guy like Roquan Smith,
right,
that he can cover 3 people just on his own.
And the Ravens do a lot of things that you see out of Cincinnati with Lou Anarumo is they will disguise zone defense in a man. you will see them walk up that fifth pass rusher, or they'll show blitz, and then right at the, it seems like, they almost got it down to a science. They drop back into a zone defense. And what I don't think, people watch the NFL when they go to the stadium, they watch it on TV and they see it and they become accustomed to what that game speed is. And I challenge anybody, if you're just a casual football fan, watch a college game on Saturday, watch that game speed, and then compare that to the NFL. So the game speed that these guys are playing at, you have to be just an absolutely offensive mastermind to take a snap under center or out of shotgun and watch a defense progress into what your pre-snap you thought they were going to be running man into a zone defense, and then make the decisions in 2.5 seconds is where that ball is going to go. And quarterbacks that are able to do that become really good quarterbacks. And Joe Burrow, that's one of the reasons why he's become a very good quarterback, because he reads a defense very well. But Baltimore is able to do that effectively, just like the Bengals. A lot of teams can't do that. A lot of teams don't have the players to do that. Cincinnati, fortunately, right now has the players to do that on defense. Baltimore sure as the heck does. So Buffalo really doesn't have that ability. So at least in my opinion, and I guess we'll find out on Sunday. But I think that when you compare who was outmatched on what side of the ball, when you look at Buffalo's defense, and we're going to talk about that in a second, and Buffalo's offense and Cincinnati's defense, and Cincinnati's offense compared to Buffalo's defense, and you're going to give an advantage one way or the other, I would think that the advantage, in my opinion, and I'm not trying to homer this, goes to Cincinnati. And that's why I think the 5.5 point spread on this game is really egregious.
Yeah, and you kind of, already segue into the defense. So let's get on to, the Cincinnati defense and how do you stop Josh Allen? And I'll say this from the get-go, ever since Josh Allen hurt his arm, he hasn't been the same player. At the beginning of the year, I think he was the MVP favorite. He looked like the MVP favorite. And I think now he's second-guessing things, Joe, because he doesn't have the arm strength that he once had. So now he's forced, instead of being a Brett Favre, in terms of arm strength, which he still does have arm strength, don't get me wrong, but when you're the number one in arm strength, now you have to use your brain a little bit more. Joe Burrow doesn't have the best arm strength in the NFL, but he's one of the smartest guys that goes under center, every single week. And I think now you're starting to have to see Josh Allen rely upon that. How well can you just read coverages? Well, when you can fit a ball, where only 2 footballs can go in that type of space, because you have that arm strength, that makes life a little bit easier. When you don't have that arm strength now and you try to fit that football in, it's getting picked off. And we've seen Josh Allen really be a turnover machine over the last few weeks. The only reason why Miami stayed in that game is because Josh Allen is turning the ball over.
Well, and Miami did something. I'll let you finish. Miami did something that I absolutely think the Bengals should do this weekend. Go ahead.
And and I think one of the reasons why Cincinnati's been so good with running quarterbacks is because they don't blitz. They got four defensive linemen, primarily almost every single play, and they got 2 that can win on the edge. Not every time, but enough. Even when Trey Hendrickson doesn't get a sack, forcing a guy out, is key. They got 2 linebackers, and Pratt and Wilson, that can play great in the zone and also good enough to be spies. Where Josh Allen gets his heyday is whenever everybody's covered up and the linebackers backed up 20 yards because they're worried about the offensive weapons, because the defense is, already getting back there, and linebackers don't have the ability to get Josh Allen. Cincinnati's do. Jermaine Pratt and Logan Wilson will have the ability to get to Josh Allen, have the tackle ability to take Josh Allen down on top of it. My biggest red flag, it comes in the secondary. Who covers Stephon Diggs? Who covers Gabe Davis? And it looks like Isaiah McKenzie's going to be back. If it's up to me, I put Eli Apple on Stephon Diggs. Stephon is not a burner, but he's one of the best technician players in the league. And I think Eli Apple could make Stephon Diggs upset enough to where it works. where Eli Apple struggles, and he's given up the most deep touchdowns in the NFL in the last 3 years, is against burners. And we saw that. Demarcus Robinson put a double move on him, and Eli Apple turned into applesauce. I mean, he just got absolutely toasted. And, and that happens at time to time. Thankfully for Cincinnati, it hasn't happened a lot because Lou Anarumo knows who to put his personnel on. And I think you put Cam Taylor-Britt on the speedster and Gabe Davis, because we know how good Gabe Davis can be. We saw that last year in the AFC, when they played the Chiefs, get 3 touchdowns. So that's my key. Can Cincinnati do just enough to force Josh Allen to throw into tight spaces? And can the cornerbacks win their job with safety help? If they can do that, Cincinnati's got one heck of a chance, because Josh Allen is going to make a bad pass. That's just all there is to it. Brett Favre, as good as he was going to make a bad pass. Right. Did you catch it or not? That's going to be the difference in the game at times.
Well, and that's exactly, teams figured out. One way to beat Brett Favre is when Brett Favre was playing, you almost had to concede. So when you look at the game of football and the chess match that is football, what concessions, what is Cincinnati's defense going to allow in order to make this a more equitable game for their defense? And I think the best way that you do that is you play a soft zone against Josh Allen, and you let him throw to his checkdowns all the time, and you let them move the ball up the field. You concede field goals to the Buffalo Bills with the understanding that your offense is going to have to put in work, and you go in with the game plan of we're going to concede field goals for touchdowns, and we'll trade them all day long, and we'll win this game. And what you will see out of Josh Allen, because you saw it against Miami. Miami played a soft zone defense, and Josh Allen turned the ball over because Josh Allen wants to throw the ball 90 yards downfield every chance he gets. And when you start throwing the ball 90 yards downfield, are there some spectacular plays that Stephon Diggs is going to make? Absolutely. Absolutely. He's going to go up and he's going to catch some great passes. And that thing's going to happen because that's what great players do. But you know what else is going to happen? Interceptions, because you're thrown in front of a defense. You're thrown in front of a Jesse Bates who's going to come up and he's going to pick the ball off. Like we've seen Jesse Bates do, like we've seen Mike Hilton do. And that's exactly what's going to happen. So when Buffalo's on offense, you let them move the ball, let them make the 4-yard out routes or let them pass to the 4-yard out routes, let them pass 3 yards over the middle in the middle of the zone. And then when Josh Allen gets frustrated because he's not throwing those home runs, he's going to throw one 60 yards down the field. And Jesse Bates is going to come up and pick it off and run it back to the 40, and we're going to and Cincinnati's going to score off that. So I think that's exactly what probably the game plan is defensively. I think that's what we were seeing in the Monday night game before it ended. And I really think when you look at the strengths of these two teams, I think, and I'm really not trying to homer this. I'm trying to be as logical as possible with the minuscule amount of football knowledge that I have, that I believe that Cincinnati should have the advantage in this game. I personally. So I know we're about out of time for this, Ryan, but that's my take on Sunday. I can't wait to head up there.
Yeah, it's going to be a good one. There's going to be a lot of Cincinnati fans. And what's going to be even cooler is two fan bases that have come together. How does Buffalo repay those respects and what the love that Cincinnati shared? And I think it's going to be a good old matchup where two fan bases, when the kickoff is, hey, we're enemies right now, probably not the extent of what it could have been. But at the end of the day, probably two fan bases that'll shake hands and wish each other well moving forward, regardless who ends up winning that game. So it should be an absolute blast. But that is going to wrap it up for us here. We'll be back with one last segment. Thank you for tuning in to Froggy Sports with Ryan and Joe. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We are live here with our last segment here on Talking Sports here on Froggy 95.9 with Ryan and Joe. And Joe, we're going to end it off with, a topic that we haven't had on this show before, and one that, kind of shows where we are as a country right now and where we are in the sports world. Those things in society have now mixed all together here into our sports world. Most of us try to escape the societal differences that we have and the opinions and whatever you may call it, politics, views, we put those aside because when they drop, the puck in this instance, we all are united as fans, and that's an escape for the world for a little bit. But that's been creeping up more and more to where that's no longer possible. And here recently, we've had a game 2 nights ago where the Philadelphia Flyers wanted to celebrate Pride Night. Okay, that's not unusual. The NHL has made a huge push to cover different things. Hockey is for everyone, is what they typically call it. So they decided to have Pride Night, and not only was that not enough to show how they accept pride in 2023. I'm sure we all know that it's very hard not to go anywhere without seeing something related to that nature. But they wanted the players to wear rainbow-colored uniforms on the pregame warm-ups. And a young player named Ivan Provorov decided that he was not going to wear such uniform. Did not make a statement about it, did not say anything beforehand about it, and then did not wear it. And then after the game, as you can imagine, Joe, the very first question to Ivan Provorov was not about hockey. It was the fact that what he was wearing before the hockey game. And I thought Ivan had probably the best answer that you can give and said, I respect everybody and I respect everybody's choice. My choice is to stay true to myself and my religion. If there's any more questions about hockey, I will answer those questions. That's all I'm going to say about that. And the reason why we brought this topic up, Joe, is because, again, we would rather talk about sports and everything else that sports has to entertain us, but more often not, the conversation is left to you now represent society as a whole, and sports has been invaded by that. And when a player dissents from what is viewed as acceptable by everybody else, he is typically hammered. Do you believe Ivan Provorov deserves to be hammered in this instance?
So I think there's two ways you can look at this. Number one, he's paid by an organization that signs his paycheck, and if they say that that's what he's going to wear, is it his job to wear it? I think you can argue from that angle, but I will argue from the angle, and I'll say from the political angle. I think everybody in this country has the right to their own opinion. I disagree politically with a large number of people. And while I disagree with what they believe politically, morally, I understand that they have the right to feel that the way that they want to feel. I have a lot of friends, I don't think it's any big secret in the world of politics, especially now. I know you go back 30, 40 years ago, nobody was talking about whether you're a Democrat or Republican or a libertarian, but I don't think it's any big secret, especially in our community, that I am a member of the Republican Party. But I have many friends that are members of the Democratic Party. And I always end conversations with them in a joking way whenever I have a political discussion or a friendly political debate with somebody. I always say, I understand you certainly have the right to be wrong and move on, and you have a laugh about it. Now, I think that whether you believe that, this player has the right to disagree with that because it goes against his values, or you believe that, he doesn't have that right. At the end of the day, he has the right to feel whatever he wants, as long as what he feels doesn't impede on another person's right. And when you're talking about, having Pride Night for the LGBT community, in a hockey game, if that organization wants to do that, I think that's okay. I think we're at a point in society where I think it's understood that sexuality in our society is not really a thing that many people care about. I think everybody's under the understanding that whatever your preference is your preference, and that's you. You're still a human being. You're still a person. I don't think anybody really on a large scale debates that anymore. Now, what I will say is that in our society, that we have got to the point where, I think that when you look at racially, when you look at sexual bias in this country, I do believe that there was a time for awareness to say, hey, there is absolutely bias against these individuals, and they don't have a fair shot in life. I think we're absolutely past that, and I think that we have come to a time in our society where I don't really think that a Pride Night as a sporting event is something that really needs to happen. And I know that somebody would probably argue with me, but I also don't think that I mean, if you want to call it, I don't think a straight night should happen at a sporting event. I don't think sexuality should be brought into professional sports at all. So I agree with this player and his individual freedom to say, you know what, I'm not wearing that. And really, if you disagree with me and my feelings on it, I'm okay with that too, because you have the right to disagree with me and I have the right to have my own opinion.
Yeah, and I think, when we look at these different type of identities that we all want to view ourselves as, sexual orientation is one that I just never understood, because never on my list of what defines Ryan Peters would I've ever said heterosexual.
Right.
There's a lot of different things, and I'm sure there's a lot of different other things that people have called me, and not one of them has referred to my sexual orientation. So why we need a night to discuss that among people that have the same feelings and the same tolerances is beyond me. But that being said, when a player decides that he wants to express himself, and he did it at the very minimal way possible, he didn't bring attention to himself. He didn't say he was going to bring attention to himself, and he lived his life. It was the media that brought the attention to somebody wearing his traditional pregame warm-up and not going with what was now special for that night. I think we have the same understanding that, we don't want religion uniforms or religious type of jerseys. I mean, those are what things people identify with. There's certainly a lot more people worldwide that identify with a religion than they do a certain sexual orientation. But I don't think either one of us would want that. I'm a Christian, and I don't want somebody wearing something that they don't feel comfortable wearing in, because I just don't think that's what it's about. And the same thing could be said with sexual orientation. If this guy doesn't identify with that sexual orientation, then why should he be forced to wear this? And there's people in the media trying to make this a lot bigger than what it was. But I think the perfect example of what you could do in this situation is answer like Yvonne did. I'm a hockey player. That's why I got in this sport. It wasn't to represent anything else besides whoever's name is on the front of my jersey and more likely to bring home Lord Stanley's Cup. And, we want to be more inclusive, Joe, but we come to a point in society that if you don't agree with what people throw into your face as what you should accept, we're less inclusive than we have ever been. Because
Exactly.
we'll do everything we can to shun you, to silence you, to take you off of things. That, one guy said that Ivan Provorov shouldn't play the rest of the year. I thought
Ridiculous.
hockey was for everyone. I thought that was the entire point of doing these type of things. And
I
he did it with the utmost respect to that community to say, you know what, you guys do your own thing. That's fine. I go worship in my own time. I do these different things because that's who makes me. He's a Russian Orthodox Christian. And maybe that's what he identifies himself as. And that's why he decided he didn't want to do these things. But if we want to be more inclusive, then you also have to see the person that decides not to do this as somebody you accept as well, because we all are made up differently, but we don't have to say this is who we are by wearing said flag, said symbol, insert whatever it may be, to be tolerant of one another. I don't have to put signs in my yard that I love every single insert whatever you identify as.
right.
I'm tolerant by the way that I treat you as a human being in a face-to-face matter, not for what I tell on the public, certainly not what I say on social media, because we know that's two entirely different worlds. But what Ivan Provorov is as a human being should matter much more than whatever type of hockey jersey that he wears, because I'm sure Ivan Provorov as the human being has impacted a lot more people based upon what he's done in their daily lives than what said jersey he wore 2 nights ago.
Yeah, and to take something not so much out of context, how about we start judging people by the content of their character instead of little small disagreements that you have with somebody for whatever reason. And I kind
And
of,
and you know who would have agreed with that, Joe, who made that statement not that long ago that we celebrated? Martin Luther King Jr.
right.
Said,
And
and that was his day on Monday.
right. And that's, right, we got to wrap this up obviously, but you know, that is something that I've always equated to whenever I get in this argument is I like pecan pie, Ryan, and you may not like pecan pie. And for me to hate you because you don't like the same pie that I like is utterly ridiculous. And that's basically what this argument comes down to. And maybe I should just move past the fact that you don't like pie and I do. So, and at the end of the day, we're both still people and we both still enjoy sports and we both still enjoy going to high school basketball games. We just don't like to eat the same thing at home.
Sports have united more people than they've ever divided them because it's been a difference of what society already has put together that separates us. And sports can still do that. So don't let people with these agendas to try to separate you, to make you upset, do that. When you watch sports, there's a ton of people that come from all different backgrounds are more united than ever than what the media tries to portray.
Very well.
So that's going to wrap it up here. We should have some news coming up here soon about some other things. So it will be exciting to share. But Joe, great show. We're going to go to Buffalo.
Who day?
Going to go outside, run around with my shirt off, and so I can get ready for Sunday's matchup.
That's right.
Thank you for tuning in to Froggy Talkin Sports with Ryan and Joe. We'll be back next week. Stay safe and God bless.